understand how to lose and why we lose, and then to grow from it and what you learn from that process, but also to win well and not boast and not be over complacent and arrogant about it. And so there's so many life lessons that I think help us all through life in friendship building, relationship building, workplace, whatever it is.
Is William pushing Camilla out? His major statement has everyone talking. I need you to stop scrolling right now, because what I am about to tell you is not what the headline said. It is not what the palace wanted you to take away, and it is definitely not what the mainstream press had the courage to say out loud. Prince William just made a statement. And on the surface, it looked like a touching tribute, a proud father moment, a glimpse into the monarchy's future. But underneath it was something that sent shockwaves through Clarence House and left Queen Camilla staring at a television screen in silence. This was not a royal speech. This was a declaration. And every single person inside that palace, including Camilla, felt every word of it. I have been covering the British royal family for years. I have watched the spin, the strategy, the carefully managed appearances. But what happened at Kensington Palace recently is unlike anything I have seen in this institution's modern history. So before you write this off as drama, stay with me. Because the real story here is not about a speech. It is about power, and who, quietly and without apology, just decided they were done waiting for it. But before I explain what William actually said, I need you to understand who Camilla is, because if you don't, you will miss why this hit her the way it did. Camilla Parker Bowles did not walk into royalty. She crawled into it, through broken glass, through 30 years of public hatred, through a grief that was never hers to carry but was placed on her shoulders anyway. When Princess Diana died, the British public needed someone to blame. And Camilla became that person. But the polls were brutal. The press was merciless. For years, she was the most disliked woman in Britain, not because of who she was, but because of what people needed her to represent. And through all of it, she stayed. She stood beside Charles. She endured the coldness of palace staff who never truly accepted her. She sat through coronation planning meetings where her own title was debated like a procedural footnote. And then, slowly, painfully slowly, things began to change. By 2023, for the first time, a majority of Britons viewed Camilla positively. 61%. She had crossed the line. She had earned it. And for one brief moment, she allowed herself to believe the hardest part was finally over. She was wrong, because something was already moving inside Kensington Palace, and it had been moving for longer than anyone admitted publicly. After Queen Elizabeth II passed, those who worked closely with William began noticing a change that was difficult to articulate but impossible to ignore. He walked into rooms differently. He stopped hedging. He stopped performing the careful deference of a man who knows he must wait his turn. The grief of losing his grandmother did something to William that royal commentators are still trying to name. It removed whatever invisible ceiling he had placed on his own authority. In the months following the coronation, a pattern began to emerge. William started canceling joint appearances with Charles that had been on the calendar for weeks, pivoting instead to high-visibility solo engagements that generated more press coverage than anything Clarence House produced. Kensington Palace stopped mirroring the communication style of the senior royals and started setting its own tone entirely. Internally, senior advisors began describing a quiet but undeniable realignment. Kensington was no longer following the lead of the institution. It was becoming the institution. And nobody inside those walls said anything. Not publicly. Not yet. Then came the event in Kensington Gardens. And I want you to understand something before I describe it. Royal speeches are reviewed, on average, 17 times before delivery. There is no such thing as an unplanned sentence at that level. Every word is weighed. Every implication is stress-tested. So when I tell you that what William said in those final 3 sentences surprised palace officials, surprised the press, and reportedly was never shared with Clarence House in advance. I need you to understand that this was not an accident. It was a choice. William stood before 400 guests at a charity event, cameras rolling, journalists poised, and for the first 9 sentences, he was perfectly on script. Legacy, service, gratitude. And then he pivoted. He introduced Princess Charlotte, not as his daughter attending a family event, not as a child representing the next generation in some vague ceremonial sense, but as an official crown representative beginning her public duties. The crowd went silent before it erupted. Palace officials in the room reportedly exchanged glances. And within the hour, Camilla's communications secretary was on the phone, being told what had just been said. She had not been consulted, not warned, not even given the courtesy of a heads-up call. Let me be very direct with you. That is not an oversight. In royal protocol, exclusion at that level is a message. And here is the number that came out 48 hours later, the one that tells you everything about why William made that move and why it landed the way it did. William and Catherine currently hold a combined approval rating of 74% among UK adults. Charles and Camilla, 51%. And among adults under 45, the generation that will define whether the monarchy survives the next 50 years. William's numbers sit at 81%. Camilla's are 38. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because 51% sounds acceptable until you understand the nature of the institution we are talking about. The British monarchy has no army. It has no enforcement power. It holds no legislative authority. It exists entirely on public goodwill and cultural relevance. 51% is not stability. 51% in an institution built on consent is a quiet emergency. And William knows it. He has known it for a long time. That statement in Kensington Gardens was not impulsive. It was a response to a mathematical reality that Clarence House has been refusing to confront. But the polls are only the surface, because what was happening inside the palace, away from cameras and official statements, was far more consequential. Staff loyalty inside royal households is not just emotional. It is operational. It determines who gets briefed first, whose schedule gets prioritized, whose communications land faster, whose requests move through the system without friction. And for the 18 months leading up to William's statement, that loyalty had been visibly, measurably shifting toward Kensington. Senior advisors who had spent years oriented toward Clarence House began making themselves available to William's team first. Foreign ambassadors and Commonwealth officials who had historically directed all formal correspondence through Camilla's office started routing their inquiries to Kensington instead. One senior diplomatic source put it with a directness that should alarm everyone paying attention. Kensington is where decisions are being made. Clarence House is where they are being announced. Do you understand what that means? Camilla holds the title. She wears the crown. She fulfills the ceremonial obligations. And the people who actually run this institution are calling a different number. She has the throne in name. William has it in practice. And the gap between those two realities is growing wider every month. Which brings me to the silence. And I want to be careful here, because this is the part of the story that I find most difficult, not because it is complicated, but because it is painfully simple. In the 72 hours following William's statement, Clarence House released no comment, no affirmation, no rebuttal, nothing. King Charles, the man Camilla spent 30 years standing beside, the man she gave her public reputation, her privacy, and in many ways her identity to, said nothing. Those close to the king describe him as withdrawn in ways that go beyond physical health. Exhausted not just by illness, but by the weight of a reign he has found more isolating than he anticipated. Sources use a phrase that I cannot stop thinking about. They say Charles has been letting go of things. A 47-minute meeting took place between Camilla's senior household team and the king's private secretary. No transcript, no public outcome. Two staff members present outside the room described the atmosphere as heavier than anything they had experienced since the days immediately after Queen Elizabeth died. I want you to think about what that means for Camilla, the woman who gave everything, to stand beside this man. And when the moment arrived, when one phone call or one quiet statement could have reaffirmed her standing, he said nothing. In a palace, silence is never neutral. It is always a choice. Now. And I want to step back from the palace gates for a moment, because this story is not just about royals. It never is. What is happening inside the House of Windsor is a version of something that happens everywhere. In boardrooms, in families, in organizations that have existed long enough to confuse tradition with relevance. The lesson at the center of this story is one that none of us can afford to ignore. Legitimacy is not a destination, it is a practice. Camilla spent 30 years earning her place, and the moment she stopped building, the moment she believed the work was done, the ground began to shift beneath her. Not because she failed, but because the world she had fought so hard to belong to had quietly moved on without her. The most dangerous rival is never the one who attacks you. It is the one who builds something better while you are celebrating what you already built. Institutions, whether they wear crowns or corner offices, do not reward loyalty. They reward relevance. And relevance requires constant, uncomfortable renewal. We see this everywhere. The colleague who gets quietly passed over, not because they performed poorly, but because they stopped growing. The leader who loses the room, not through scandal, but through stillness. Power does not always get taken. Sometimes it simply drifts toward whoever decided, with clarity and without apology, that they were ready to carry it. And that brings me to the part of this story that nobody, and I mean nobody, in the royal commentary space is talking about. Because we have all been watching William, we should have been watching Catherine. Of multiple palace sources, speaking independently over the past several months, describe a pattern that reframes this entire situation. The repositioning of Kensington Palace as the monarchy's operational center was not a spontaneous decision. It was a 14-month strategy, and the person most consistently described as its architect is not William. It is Catherine. The Princess of Wales spent the better part of last year commissioning internal polling on public attitudes toward the monarchy's next generation, results that showed overwhelming support for a Charlotte-forward narrative years ahead of any official succession timeline. She quietly built relationships with Commonwealth representatives that bypassed traditional palace channels. For she guided William's public engagements with a strategic precision that senior advisors describe as unlike anything they had seen from a royal spouse in decades. William stepped into that Kensington garden with confidence. But the ground he was standing on, Catherine built it. And if that is true, then Camilla is not facing a prince who got ambitious. She is facing something far more formidable. She is facing a long game, played quietly by someone who has never once needed to raise her voice to change the room. So here is where we land, and I want to be honest with you about what I believe is coming. Camilla will keep her title. She will attend the engagements. She will appear in the photographs. The palace will not move against her openly. That is not how this institution operates. But her influence, the kind that actually shapes decisions, that moves resources, that determines whose vision of the monarchy gets built, that has already been restructured. William did not remove her. He did something more permanent. He made her optional. The monarchy is not collapsing. It is migrating, shifting from one generation to the next, faster than anyone planned, and with less ceremony than anyone expected. And the life lesson in all of this, the one I keep coming back to, is simply this. The people who shape the future are rarely the ones who fought the hardest for the present. They are the ones who were already building the next thing while everyone else was protecting what they had. So I will ask you the question I always come back to when I cover this family. Is this progress, or is this just power wearing a nicer suit? Type W in the comments if you believe William is right to move the monarchy forward. Type C if you believe Camilla deserves far more respect for everything she sacrificed to get here. And type K if, after everything I just told you, you think Catherine is the real story nobody is ready to tell. Because the crown is not being stolen. It is not being fought over in corridors or chambers. It is simply moving toward whoever decided they were ready to carry it. And the only question that truly matters, the one I want you to think about long after this video ends, is whether Camilla was ever truly given the chance to be ready, or whether the decision about her future was made long before she ever put on the crown.